After the intense battle between Sakamoto and Shin against Heisuki, they managed to win the grand prize of the airsoft tournament, as well as gaining a new friend. In this video, we will discuss Shin's backstory and how he acquired his clairvoyant powers, along with some new enemies connected to the target of the Order members, known as X. In the next scene, we move to the school where Hana is studying, and it appears there's a parent-student event because the parents of the children are also present. Sakamoto and Aoi were delightedly watching Hana as she energetically answered questions from their teacher there. Aoi then wondered if it was a good idea that they had asked Shin and Lu to watch the shop for the day, hoping that the two of them were managing it well. While Sakamoto was taking pictures of Hana, he thought that those two were probably doing okay. The scene then shifts to Sakamoto's convenience store, where we see Shin annoyed because Lu constantly uses his apron for dirty jobs. Lu teased him by saying he was always complaining, which led Shin to order her to clean the windows, prompting Lu to question why she had to do it. Shin seriously said he just wanted to clarify things, and now that Sakamoto and Aoi were at Parents' Day at Hana's school, he was in charge of the place. Lu said that was good for Shin, but Shin overheard her thinking he sometimes really acts like a child. Because of this, Shin got frustrated with her and said if she had something to say, she should say it out loud, and did she think he couldn't hear her thoughts? Lu irritably responded that she was free to think whatever she wanted, and that Shin was the weirdo who always listened to others' thoughts. Then, Heisuki arrived with Pisuki as always, saying he came to pick up the leftover pork buns. However, it was bad timing because he found Lu and Shin arguing, and Lu was throwing the leftover pork buns at Shin, calling him a creepy blonde mind stalker because he was always reading other people's minds like a perv, while Shin was trying to quiet her down while being called a drunken apron thief. Because of that, Lu shouted even louder, saying she couldn't relax when Shin was there because she didn't know if he was reading her mind or not. It seemed that Lu's words had a strong impact on Shin, and he just stopped, quickly apologizing while walking away. Heisuki asked if he should follow her, to which Lu firmly said no. After that, Heisuki asked if he could still eat the pork buns Lu had thrown on the floor, but Lu just told him to leave the convenience store. In the next scene, Shin walked outside feeling irritated, and Lu was just resting her head on the cash register, also feeling irritated. She remembered Shin's reaction when she said she couldn't relax when he was around, thinking she had never seen that expression on Shin before. She thought she hadn't done anything wrong, but she decided to be nicer when Shin returned. That was also the grown-up thing to do, even if it was annoying. While still irritated with Shin, suddenly 5 people entered wearing full bodysuits resembling those from Among Us, and they questioned if this was the place they were looking for. Lu turned around, and when they saw the name tag on her apron, they mistook Lu for Shin, so they commented that Lu needed to come with them. They tied up Lu and put her in a van, and it was crazy because who would think that this subject, 11 years after escaping from the laboratory, was living peacefully in such a town. They had thought this subject was dead. They added that the hair color was different in person than in the picture, and because of the name, they assumed it was a man, but they let it go. It turns out the speaker was a man named Tanaka when their driver called him Mr. Tanaka, and he said it might be hard to bring up, but did he think this wasn't the child in the image? Tanaka looked at Lu, suddenly got angry, and said of course they got the right child because the name tag said Shin, and he called the driver Seba, where Seba apologized. One of their companions in the back of the van asked what the person who hired them needed with that child, where Tanaka explained he didn't know the other details there, and pointed out that the laboratory experimented with supernatural powers, and Shin is considered as a successful specimen, an actual clairvoyant. That caught Lu's attention, and Seba commented that it was creepy to think there was someone who could peek into your mind. Who would want to be with such a person, he wondered, and it seemed lonely, where one of their companions laughed because it was pitiful. Unexpectedly, Lu kicked the one who said that while still tied up, saying she heard what he said. Proudly, Lu told them that Shin might be foolish, neurotic, and childish, but he was a better person than the people in that van. Tanaka was puzzled by what was happening, while Lu continued to speak. asking who they were to assume that someone else's life is miserable because they are different. Tanaka spoke up and said just a moment and asked for Lu's name, which he then provided. So Seiba told him he had already said that Tanaka was wrong and wasn't really listening. Because of this, Tanaka became nervous and asked where the real Shin was. While that was happening, we see Shin, and he decided to return to the convenience store and apologize because that was the grown-up thing to do. But when he arrived there, Lu wasn't there, so he thought she was slacking off again. He noticed the shards on the floor, so he quickly realized something bad had happened. Suddenly, Sakamoto arrived there, so he was surprised, and Sakamoto wondered what had happened, causing Shin to look at him anxiously. After a few moments, the two of them discussed what had happened with Lu earlier, and when he returned, Lu was no longer there. Shin apologized to Sakamoto because he believed he was at fault, while Sakamoto took out his cell phone and mentioned that Lu was moving along the national highway, heading southwest, which caught Shin's attention. Shin wondered what Sakamoto was using, so Sakamoto explained that their apron name tags had GPS trackers, which shocked Shin because he was unaware of them. After that, they went to Sakamoto's garage, intending to drive and retrieve Lu, and upon opening the garage, it appeared they would be using a motorcycle. Meanwhile, Tanaka was irritated with his companions because their operation was a disaster, and he was certain that the person who ordered them would kill them. Tanaka got annoyed with Seiba and ordered him off the freeway, and Seiba explained that the next exit was 15 kilometers away. This made Tanaka nervous, and he mentioned that this was why he doesn't want to do field duty, where Seiba suggested they could just pretend that the child they captured was Shin. Tanaka thought that was a good idea, and they could just say that the ESP powers were gone. But when Seiba pointed out that gender might also be a problem, Tanaka was rendered speechless again. In her mind, Lu chastised herself for being so foolish, sure that this was her punishment for being mean to Shin. She remembered what she had said earlier and what Tanaka said, thinking that Shin was probably still mad at her. She hadn't meant to hurt him, so she hoped she could apologize. Seiba suddenly noticed something in the rearview mirror, and upon closer inspection, it turned out to be Sakamoto and Shin on a motorcycle, seemingly leaping from one part of the skyway to another. Before long, Sakamoto managed to catch up with the van that had kidnapped Lu, and Lu tearfully called out their names, catching Tanaka's attention when she called Shin's name. Sakamoto then spoke to Tanaka, stating he was there to take back his employee. Tanaka realized that the person with Sakamoto was the real Shin. To confirm this, he compared the appearance of the person with the child in the photo, and indeed, it was the Shin they were looking for, which Seiba said was good. They immediately decided to capture Shin, and he overheard them thinking that he would no longer be killed in the lab. Shin's eyes widened when he heard that they were from the laboratory. Tanaka told their companions to proceed, so they got out of the van, riding motorcycles and electric batons. One of the attackers approached Sakamoto and prepared to hit him with an electric baton, but Sakamoto easily kicked him towards the wall beside them, causing the entire motorcycle and his face to scrape against it. Soon, the motorcycle was destroyed, and the attacker was thrown onto the highway. One of the attackers was stunned and suddenly saw Shin riding a pickup truck. Shin asked the driver for a piece of wood, to which the driver agreed. While one of the attackers was still wondering what Shin would do with the wood, Shin threw it, and it got stuck in the attacker's motorcycle wheel, causing him to crash. The pickup driver was amazed and asked if they were making a movie, to which Shin agreed. The remaining attacker was furious at Shin and threatened to make them pay for what they had done. However, his speech was cut short when Sakamoto suddenly swerved and went in front of him. Sakamoto lifted his motorcycle and used its wheel to strike the remaining attacker's face. Tanaka commented that Sakamoto and Shin were nuts, and Seiba asked if their men were defeated quickly, to which Tanaka agreed. Lu shouted from behind and told them to stop, warning that they wouldn't want to anger her boss. She suggested they apologize before anyone got hurt and the situation escalated. Tanaka was annoyed and strangled her into silence. He asked if she knew what would happen to them if they returned to the laboratory empty-handed. He said their bosses there were scarier than Sakamoto, so Lu should be scared too, While Tanaka explained that once the bosses were done, no one knew what they would do to their bodies, Shin suddenly jumped on top of their van, startling them. Shin immediately asked if Lu was okay, while a nervous Tanaka called out to Seiba, who silenced him, saying he couldn't hear the radio. Tanaka told him to stop what he's doing and help with their task. Seiba listened briefly to the radio but then followed orders. He removed his headgear and exited the van. As he climbed up, he commented on how it was a shame since he was enjoying listening to the radio. Seiba took off his entire bodysuit and told his boss to ensure there would be a bonus for what he was about to do. Shin warned him that if he approached, he wouldn't hold back, while Tanaka told him to do his thing. Seiba covered his nose and mouth with his jacket and commented on how annoying it was to have an incompetent boss. Suddenly, he seemed to become invisible in front of Shin. Both Sakamoto and Shin were shocked. Unable to see Seiba, Shin was easily pushed off the van, causing him to crash into a nearby car. The pain was evident on Shin's face from the impact, while Sakamoto suddenly sensed something in front of him. Seiba jumped onto Sakamoto's motorcycle, prompting Shin to shout a warning to be careful. When Seiba was about to touch Sakamoto's face, Sakamoto sensed it and stopped him. Seiba commented on Sakamoto's strong instincts. Suddenly, Sakamoto grabbed Seiba by the neck, to which Seiba sarcastically responded that it was terrifying. Seiba shouted for Sakamoto to let go and then punctured the gas tank of Sakamoto's motorcycle, catching his attention. Shortly after, Sakamoto's motorcycle exploded, causing Shin to worry. Seiba managed to jump back onto the top of their van. Seiba remarked that was the legendary assassin and thought it was the end for him. When Tanaka asked if Seiba had caught Shin, Seiba admitted he forgot while revealing himself again. Their van sped away with Lu still inside. Seiba suggested to Tanaka that they return to Plan A and deliver Lu to the lab, which made Tanaka shout that it wasn't Plan A. Shin noted that they were getting away, and he was irritated because their motorcycle was also destroyed, preventing them from chasing. Sakamoto saw that the GPS stopped at Okutabi and wondered who those men were. Shin guessed that they were from the lab, which puzzled Sakamoto. Shin explained that it was an underground scientific research facility, known as the lab. He added that it wasn't officially recognized by the government, and it was where he grew up. Sakamoto was surprised, and Shin started to explain that he came from there a long time ago. Shin said that while the people there were weird, they weren't as violent as those they had just fought. He was sure he had never seen such gear that could make the wearer invisible, and he wondered what had happened to that place. Sakamoto said that, in any case, they needed to get Lu back. Sakamoto stood up and suggested they visit Shin's old home, to which Shin agreed. Elsewhere, at Sakamoto's convenience store, Heisuke arrived with Pisuke and looked for Shin and Sakamoto. Heisuke mentioned he had found 500 yen under the vending machine, while Hana, who had been left behind, sadly said they were all gone. Hana, near tears, said she wanted to talk about what happened on Parents' Day, but her father left with Shin and Lu. Heisuke didn't know what to do while Hana cried, but he tried to cheer her up by giving her acorns and candy. Pisuke suddenly pulled Heisuke's ear and said something to him. Heisuke then told Hana he would find them, prompting Hana to ask how. Heisuke explained that Pisuke could find anyone he had seen before while flying. Hana stopped crying and asked if that was true, to which Heisuke confirmed it was, and they would take care of it. They then watched Pisuke fly off to find Sakamoto. In the next scene, Sakamoto and Shin arrived at the lab. Sakamoto commented that it was the place and mentioned they had brought Hana there a few times. Shin explained that at first glance, it looked like a museum to hide the lab from the underworld. It turned out that the lab was in the basement of the Okutabi Science Museum. While looking at it, Sakamoto remarked that he should get some souvenirs for Hana and Aoi. After that, Sakamoto said they would take Lu back, and Shin agreed. Upon entering the museum, they went to the counter to buy tickets. Once inside, they looked around and noticed many people visiting. Shin explained that on the surface, it was just an ordinary museum. Suddenly, someone greeted them, welcoming them to the museum, and said they would learn a lot about science and nature. They were also asked if it was their first time there. The staff then asked if they would like to take a photo as a souvenir. Shin quickly declined, saying they were in a hurry, but the photographer insisted. Shin more seriously stated that they were not interested in a photo, to which the photographer cheerfully explained it would only take a minute. Eventually, Sakamoto and Shin were both persuaded to wear dinosaur costumes and pose for the camera. The photographer was pleased they agreed and charged them 4,900 yen for a large print. Shin immediately ordered a copy because, deep down, he was pleased with the result. Shin told Sakamoto that their costumes were the perfect way to hide their faces, and Sakamoto added that they were comfortable too. So, they walked around the museum wearing dinosaur headgear. Shin said the first thing they needed to do was find the way to the basement. While walking, they saw one of the workers sweeping and thinking about how boring it was to work on the upper floor. The worker wished he was in the basement, having heard that the salary there was double what he earned now. Sakamoto and Shin immediately approached him and told him not to move, asking if he worked for the lab. The worker was puzzled and wondered who the silly dinosaurs were. Shin pointed out that if the worker caused trouble, he would die, and if he turned around, he would still die, so he should answer their questions. Shin asked how they could get to the basement. The worker seriously said he wouldn't tell them and called Sakamoto a tubby dinosaur jerk. In response, Sakamoto took a tooth from one of the dinosaur fossils and stabbed it into the worker's nose, forcing him to apologize and explain that the way to the basement was in the annex. In the next scene, Sakamoto and Shin arrived at the annex. Shin was amazed by the T-Rex fossil there, and Sakamoto commented on its size. The worker had given them a list and instructed them to follow the directions to access the hidden pathway. They followed the instructions, first setting the clock in the exhibit to 8:20, then turning the head of the taxidermy brown bear 90 degrees to the left. This caused an elevator to appear between two standing bears. Shin was amazed, while Sakamoto commented on how troublesome it was to open, and Shin mentioned that such things didn't exist when he was there before. Before long, they completed the final instruction. Using an ammonite fossil they had obtained from the worker, they inserted it into the elevator. Unfortunately, there was an error in recognition as the fingerprints did not match, and their identity confirmation was declined. Suddenly, the brown bear to their left moved, and an alarm sounded, announcing error code 203 and an intruder alert. A gun emerged from the mouth of the taxidermy bear and started shooting at Shin and Sakamoto. Sakamoto quickly approached the bear's face and kneaded, causing its mouth to close. Shin followed up with a javelin throw that pierced the bear's head. The robotic system detected the damage and began to reactivate, startling Shin. Sakamoto told him to hurry and take down the bear so they could get Lu before dinner, and Shin agreed. Meanwhile, on floor B2 inside the lab, Tanaka was pushing Lu, who was bound and tied to a box. The place caught Lu's attention, making her wonder what kind of place it was. Soon, they encountered a man wearing a suit with a reindeer head, and Tanaka looked nervous as the man asked if the child they brought was the clairvoyant boy. Tanaka nervously confirmed, and the reindeer head man commented that the gender and hair color of the child did not match the picture. The man lifted his reindeer helmet, revealing a face covered in stitches with an X-shaped scar in the middle of his mouth. He warned Tanaka that if he lied to Mr. Reindeer, he would die. Tanaka was terrified and agreed, while Lu wondered who this man was. She noticed that the reindeer man's face and hands were full of stitches, which creeped her out. Seiba suddenly excused himself and asked if he could speak. The boss allowed it, so Seiba explained that the child they brought was not the clairvoyant they were looking for, but he knew how to find the real one, which shocked Tanaka. Because of this, Mr. Reindeer's other subordinates took Tanaka and Lu to another place, while Tanaka cursed Seiba and Lu complained about her sore butt. Mr. Reindeer asked Seiba if he truly knew how to find the clairvoyant boy, and Seiba confirmed. Mr. Reindeer said they needed to find the boy at all costs, or else who would be extremely disappointed. Mr. Reindeer tightly gripped Saba's shoulder and asked if he could count on him. Saba agreed and promised to do his best. Elsewhere, Tanaka and Lou were placed in a cell inside the lab, with Tanaka being extremely irritated at Saba. While Tanaka was making noise, Lou recalled the appearance of Mr. Reindeer and wondered about the mark on his face, thinking she had seen it somewhere before. Meanwhile, outside the museum, Shishiba arrived with Osaraji. Shishiba commented that it had been a long time since he last rode a bus. Osaraji gave him a snack bar, suggesting they eat it, to which Shishiba noted that she still carried them for good luck. After that, Shishiba asked if the place was really connected to X, and Osaraji explained that investigating was part of their job. Shishiba then suggested they get started, and Osaraji agreed. Back with Sakamoto and Shin, they had managed to stop the animatronic bears they were fighting. Shin remarked on how tough they were. Shin suddenly asked if Sakamoto had ever fought a real bear, to which Sakamoto replied that he had completed standard animal combat training. Sakamoto commented that they had wasted a lot of time there and urged them to hurry, to which Shin agreed but mentioned that they first needed to open the elevator. Suddenly, something moved behind them. It was the fossil of the T-Rex, which made Shin freeze in fear. The fossil was also programmed to kill intruders and prepared to charge at them. Sakamoto, on the other hand, was excited, saying he had never fought a dinosaur before, which further shocked Shin at his reaction. The T-Rex immediately sent a tail whip towards the two of them, but they easily dodged it. Shin was astonished, commenting on how insane the situation was, while Sakamoto was excited, thinking how much Hana would love to see the moving dinosaur, which further baffled Shin. Before long, Sakamoto decided that they should bring the dinosaur back alive to show Hana, prompting Shin to shout, questioning what Sakamoto was even thinking. The T-Rex tumbled, leaving Shin speechless, and sent another tail axe towards both him and Sakamoto. Shin commented on how agile the dinosaur was, while Sakamoto pondered how they could capture it. Shin mentioned that the tail of this fossil was a real problem, and when the T-Rex opened its mouth, Shin noticed something. Shin explained to Sakamoto that there was some kind of electrical device on its head, suggesting they could disable it without damaging the dinosaur using his taser. Sakamoto agreed it was a good idea. Shin was taken aback by Sakamoto complimenting his idea. Sakamoto then charged towards the T-Rex. He dodged another tail whip attack and, once he got close to the dinosaur's head, aimed his taser gun at it. Pulling the trigger caused an electrical shock to surge through the fossil's body, frying its circuits. Shin was pleased with the result of Sakamoto's move, but the dinosaur's system quickly rebooted, raising its combat level to the maximum. The T-Rex delivered a powerful tail slam towards Sakamoto, hitting him solidly and alarming Shin. Sakamoto stood up again and aimed his taser gun at the fossil, but unfortunately, the dinosaur quickly destroyed his weapon with its tail. The T-Rex roared loudly, irritating Sakamoto, who commented that the situation was becoming a hassle. Sakamoto wanted to keep the fossil intact, but he was too irritated to hold back any longer. The T-Rex charged at him, but with a single punch, Sakamoto easily destroyed the electronic device in its mouth. The fossil's skull was completely shattered, leaving Shin utterly bewildered as he watched. Sakamoto patted the dinosaur's head and then kicked it forcefully, while Shin's expression remained indescribable. In the end, Sakamoto destroyed the T-Rex's spine with an axe kick and stood on top of the fossil's remains like a warlord. He remarked that dinosaurs are better when they don't move because that's their mystique, to which Shin responded bewildered, "Is that so?" Meanwhile, in another location, the underground headquarters in Research Lab A, the scientists were visibly anxious, wondering about the noise earlier, thinking it might have been a security breach at the entrance. One of the staff members in a full bodysuit, looking like a character from Among Us, pushed one of the scientists and told them to stop slacking off. One of the scientists complained that they needed rest because they hadn't slept for 3 days. But the worker in the full-body suit responded by asking if they were rebelling against the organization. He said if they wanted to rest, they should show results and called them useless hacks. Suddenly, a female scientist named Miss Namiki collapsed from exhaustion, causing her co-workers to worry. Another scientist remarked that Namiki was the 5th scientist to collapse that month and that they couldn't continue working like this as someone might die. He added, asking the bodysuit-wearing worker if they thought that messed-up research would succeed. The bodysuit-wearing worker became angry at his comment and pointed a gun at the scientist, saying he had said something he shouldn't have and tarnished the organization's reputation. As the Among Us worker was about to pull the trigger, someone grabbed the gun and blocked its barrel, causing him to be surprised. It turned out that Sakamoto and Shin had arrived, and Shin quickly broke the bodysuit man's neck. When the scientists looked down the hallway, they saw a bunch of bodysuit-wearing employees knocked out on the hallway's floor. Shin remarked that he had been away from this place for a long time and asked what was happening there. The scientists were shocked that Shin had returned and asked why he was there, while Sakamoto looked on. Shin told them not to worry, as he wouldn't be staying and just had an errand to run. When he asked where their boss was, one of the scientists explained that their chief was imprisoned on the lowest floor and that the group of assassins had taken over the lab, which puzzled Shin. In the lab's prison, Tanaka was still shouting, saying he didn't want to be a guinea pig and demanded to be released. Annoyed by his noise, Lu kicked him in the face to shut him up. Tanaka commented that it was mean and savage of Lu and asked what she was doing. Lu asked if Tanaka was blind, explaining that she was trying to escape. Tanaka mocked her, saying that she was using only a small rock to escape, and asked if she really thought that would work. Suddenly, someone else spoke up, agreeing with Tanaka that what Lu was doing was pointless. When Lu turned, they saw another man who looked like a scientist with long hair, chained by both hands. He explained that the lock was as sturdy as its mechanism was simple. He said that the bits of mortar rubble scattered there were no match for iron, likening it to rain and wind trying to topple a boulder. In other words, they needed to alter the fundamental properties of the iron to escape from that cell. Lu asked who this man was, and suddenly the man showed that he had managed to remove his handcuffs. He said that if they wanted, he could tell them how to open the locks there. The man introduced himself as Asakura, the head of the research lab they were in, and asked Lu and Tanaka if they wanted to escape with him. Lu and Tanaka were both very surprised, and meanwhile, on the other side, the scientists were also puzzled as to why Sakamoto and Shin was wearing a dinosaur costume. Lu asked if Asakura was the boss, and when he realized that if Asakura was the boss there, it meant he was the one who had him kidnapped, so Lu immediately strangled him tightly. However, Asakura explained that he wasn't the one responsible. He pointed out that he was also imprisoned with her, so why would he be the one giving orders? Lu believed him but immediately ordered him to tell everything he knew. Asakura agreed and summarized the important points. He explained that the place they were in was the lab, a covert research institute, and he used to be in charge there, but now he doesn't know who is. He explained that 6 days and 13 hours ago, a mysterious armed group took over the facility, and based on what he heard, some of them were assassins. He was imprisoned by them when he didn't follow their orders, and that's all he knew. Lu shouted that if that was the case, why was she there, and she didn't understand. Asakura also shouted back, asking how he would know and who Lu was. Lu was taken aback because she realized something. She soon grabbed Tanaka by the collar and shook him while saying that he mistook her for Shin and kidnapped her. He caught Asakura's attention when she mentioned Shin's name, and Asakura asked if he was referring to the clairvoyant boy, to which Lu also asked if Asakura knew him. Asakura repeated Lu's question and explained that he was the one who gave Shin his clairvoyant powers. Lu was shocked and thought that Shin was born with those powers, but Asakura explained that it wasn't the case. Shin was just an ordinary mischievous boy at first, and his research was the reason Shin's life changed. We went back to a point in time when Shin was only 6 years old, and Asakura, who was then 25 years old, was with him, and they were eating. Here, Shin got angry because he didn't want to eat meat and returned it to Asakura. Asakura explained that the magnesium and other nutrients in meat help prevent malnutrition and asked if Shin understood that. While trying to eat the meat, Shin complained that he didn't like the meat Asakura made because it was tough and rubbery. Because of this, Asakura got annoyed and immediately took the meat Shin was eating and ate it himself, saying that it was pointless to waste nutrients on an idiot. In Asakura's mind, he was thinking about why he was stuck taking care of this kid and called Ando a jerk. Asakura explained that at this time, he was researching supernatural powers at the lab, and his former friend Ando left Shin with him and suddenly disappeared. Asakura continued to recount his experience while taking care of Shin back then, saying that he wasn't really good with kids and, in fact, didn't like them. It showed how mischievous Shin was while Asakura was taking care of him. Shin would take his food, which annoyed him, and his things would get damaged because of Shin's naughtiness. He would even bathe Shin and teach him to study. Because of this, he thought that during these times, it was ridiculous, and he was becoming a neurotic parent, and he got even more irritated because his research wasn't going well. Young Shin approached him and asked what he was doing. Asakura explained that he was researching how to expand the thresholds of brain activity. In other words, he was developing superhuman powers. Shin was puzzled, so Asakura commented that it was not surprising that Shin didn't understand. Shin asked if it was fun, to which Asakura laughed and said what could be more fun than that. After all, no one had done it before. He asked that wouldn't it be cool to be the first person to do something, to which Shin bluntly replied that it wouldn't be. Asakura then said to forget it, and he would show Shin once he succeeded. Despite Shin saying it wasn't cool, he was visibly happy when he heard that Asakura would show it to him. In the following scenes, it showed how Shin became kind while letting Asakura focus on his research and how he would cover him with a blanket when he fell asleep while working. After that, while Asakura was walking in the laboratory, two men commented on how tired he looked and that his research wouldn't succeed. Shin heard this, got irritated, and threw something at a scientist with a buzz cut, saying who was he to say that Asakura's research wouldn't succeed. He charged at them, but Asakura stopped him. In the next scene, the day came when Asakura saw progress in his research. The reaction he was seeing was very different from anything he'd seen before. He was extremely excited, thinking it might be the formula he was looking for, so he immediately searched for the previous data to verify it. It was early in the morning, and Shin woke up because he was thirsty. Still groggy from sleep, he mistook the contents of an Erlenmeyer flask for water and drank it. Asakura was shocked when he saw this and shouted, asking what Shin was doing. Shin's eyes widened, and Asakura immediately asked if he was okay. Not long after, Shin vomited after drinking the flask's contents. In the next scene, while Asakura was bathing Shin, he thought that Shin seemed unchanged and that his experiment might have failed. He thought it didn't matter anymore. What was important was that Shin was okay. Suddenly, Shin replied that he was not okay, and the drink tasted horrible. Asakura was shocked and asked if he had said his thoughts out loud. At this point, Asakura realized that his experiment had succeeded. Shin could read people's thoughts, and Asakura was thrilled about the success of his research. It showed how Shin used his new powers to demonstrate what he could do to other scientists, and they were amazed. However, it didn't take long for the other researchers to start avoiding Shin. One day, Shin asked if anyone wanted to play with him, but they just said they were busy and maybe next time. Because of this, Shin got bored, but soon he heard the researchers' negative comments about his powers. They said they would no longer have privacy, his ability was freaky, it was disturbing, and they felt sorry for Shin, and they couldn't relax with him around. Asakura explained that he dedicated himself to his research because he believed it would help humanity, but the results were entirely different. At this time, he was explaining to Shin that he was finished with his research on superhuman abilities, so Shin should wait, and he would make a drug to reverse its effects. Shin told him not to do it, saying that his research had finally succeeded and asking if he wasn't happy about it. Asakura paused, holding Shin while silently apologizing for involving him in his stupid research, to which Shin responded that his research wasn't stupid. In the end, after their conversation, Shin left the lab. Asakura wondered how he would face Shin after all that had happened, and when he heard someone sniffing beside him, it turned out that Lu and Tanaka were sobbing, saying his story was very sad. Not long after, Lu said that despite everything, she was sure Shin didn't hold a grudge against him, prompting Asakura to seriously ask how she knew that. Lu explained that she knew because she knew Shin. She said Shin liked his power and that their boss didn't talk much, so she was even jealous of him. Asakura was shocked to hear that Shin had a boss, and Lu continued her explanation, saying that if Asakura was still sad about what happened between him and Shin, they could apologize to Shin together. Lu added that Article 11 of the Sakamoto family rule states, if you get in a fight with someone, make up by the end of the day, and that was Shin's new family rule. Lu pointed out that since Asakura's apology was somewhat late, it might be better if he brought a bribe, like a treat. Asakura was initially stunned but soon smiled. He took out a tube and commented that he was starting to feel like a fool and asked if Shin was taller now. Using the liquid in the tube he took out, he easily opened the prison door, catching the guard's attention, who asked who was there. Lu immediately grabbed the top part of the door and kicked the guard in the face, saying he should see for himself who it was. Soon after, they managed to get out of the cell, and their escape mission began. In the next scene, we are shown the diagram of the laboratory. Shishiba and Osaraji are on the first floor, Sakamoto and Shin are on basement 1, Lu, Asakura, and Tanaka are on basement 4, and Reindeer Man and Seiba are on basement 5. On basement 4, Team Lu is escaping, while Sakamoto and Shin are gathering information from Shin's former scientist friends. They explain that the group of assassins he mentioned emerged 6 days ago. We flash back to when the assassins first arrived, revealing that the Reindeer Man's name is Kashima. He introduced himself to the scientists as an assassin. He had some subordinates with him and explained that they were looking for innovative assassination tools because guns and knives were outdated and assassins needed cutting-edge technology. Hence, they wanted to borrow the scientist's intellect. The scientist explained to Sakamoto that the group consisted of their leader, Kashima, some other bosses, and rank-and-file members wearing protective suits. He added that each boss was in charge of one floor, from basement 1 to basement 5. Shin and Sakamoto commented that in other words, if they wanted to find Lu, they would likely have to fight those people. The scientist suddenly shouted and told them not to be crazy, and that they needed to escape immediately. As he explained that a patrol would arrive soon, the door behind him suddenly opened. Shin quickly pulled him aside to hide, as the patrol had arrived. A man who looked like a mad scientist, with syringes sticking out of his shoulders and Einstein-like hair, entered. He asked why it was noisy there, and if they were conducting an experiment. This creepy scientist asked if he could join them. Shin's accompanying scientist explained it was nothing, and it turned out Sakamoto and Shin had managed to hide in the lockers. The mad scientist borrowed the scientist's pin and suddenly stabbed it into his hand, calling him a liar and causing him to scream loudly. He asked why their underlings in the hallway and outside were unconscious and suspected that he was hiding something. Shin whispered worriedly inside the locker, and the scientist whispered back, telling him not to come out because the mad scientist would kill him. Sakamoto, on the other hand, was stuck inside another locker due to his broad body. The irritated mad scientist asked who among the scientists wanted to speak first and instructed them to take out all of their pins. Suddenly, a pin flew quickly towards the mad scientist's face, but he managed to dodge it, and it hit the pin he was holding instead. The mad scientist commented that he knew it, and it turned out that Shin had thrown the pin. He praised the mad scientist's reflexes. Because of this, his scientist friend scolded him for revealing himself while Sakamoto was still stuck inside. Shin said there was no special reason why he went there, and while recalling the times he had fun with Asakura and other scientists, he mentioned that he just didn't like confined spaces. The mad scientist asked him if it was okay for him to leave since they already had plenty of guinea pigs there, to which Shin asked if he was the boss of that floor. The mad scientist seriously asked what if he was, and if Shin thought he could handle him. Suddenly, the mad scientist's mood changed, and he told Shin not to do anything because they were conducting amazing research there. He then decided to show him something. The mad scientist took out a syringe, and in an instant, it disappeared from in front of Shin and ended up behind him, where it was injected into the back of his neck. Shin couldn't react due to its speed, and it seemed the mad scientist placed something in his neck as a sound was heard, causing the other scientists to worry about him. The mad scientist commented that he had primed the subject and that they were about to start a fun experiment. There was a device on his arm, and when he pressed it, Shin's speech became jumbled as he tried to speak. The scientists were stunned, and Shin couldn't comprehend what had happened, while Sakamoto continued trying to get out of the locker. The mad scientist was pleased with his actions and thought about how cool his speech reversing switch was. He explained that the electricity supplied by the electrode implanted in Shin's brain was disrupting the signals from his brain. Annoyed, Shin charged at the mad scientist while trying to tell him to go to hell and make him go back to normal. However, the mad scientist was just amused and prepared to perform his next trick. Unexpectedly, the mad scientist received a solid punch to the face from Sakamoto, who had gotten out of the locker. The mad scientist was sent flying by Sakamoto's punch, and Shin was pleased with his arrival. Sakamoto commented that Shin seemed to be having fun, to which an irritated Shin told him not to mess with him. Suddenly, Sakamoto pointed out that he didn't know Shin's history with that place and asked if he wanted to save it, to which Shin agreed. Sakamoto said it was time to clean his old house, which hyped up Shin as well. The mad scientist suddenly laughed and, as he stood up, commented that the legendary assassin had arrived. He was amazed by his extraordinary strength and speed and expressed a desire to study him. Shin was worried because the mad scientist wasn't fazed by Sakamoto's attack. The mad scientist added that it's too bad Sakamoto is way out of shape, that even he was able to get the jump on him. Sakamoto was shocked to discover that the mad scientist had also implanted an electrode in the back of his neck. The mad scientist wondered aloud what would happen next. Sakamoto suddenly charged, ready to punch, saying he didn't care about that. However, unexpectedly, he ended up punching Shin in the face instead of the mad scientist. Shin cried out and asked why Sakamoto did that. Sakamoto explained that he intended to punch the mad scientist, but his body didn't follow his command. The mad scientist was delighted with the result of his work and remarked on how amusing science could be. While the mad scientist was reveling in his success, he suddenly received a powerful punch to the face from Sakamoto, causing him to wonder how it happened. Sakamoto explained that if he aimed to punch Shin, he could hit their enemy, which he found strange. Shin was scared because he knew that punch was meant for him, and Sakamoto's punch was even stronger this time. When Sakamoto tried to hit Shin, he managed to strike the mad scientist instead. Shin was shocked because it seemed like Sakamoto genuinely wanted to punch him. The mad scientist was still conscious and simply reset his dislocated jaw from Sakamoto's punch. He explained that the injection in Sakamoto's neck caused his brain to invert friend and foe. He introduced himself to us as Mad Horiguchi. Shin commented on how tough the man's face was, while Sakamoto didn't care about what Horiguchi said because he only needed to attack Shin. However, instead of hitting Horiguchi, his solid punch landed on Shin's face, causing his nose to bleed. Horiguchi laughed at his own handiwork and explained that the device on his arm allowed him to turn the effect of the injection on and off for Sakamoto. He then injected something into his arm, causing his muscles to swell, and told them to watch him. Shin found it disgusting and commented on how tacky it was. Horiguchi then tried to punch them with his powered-up arm. Shin managed to identify Horiguchi's vulnerable spot and tried to kick it, but Horiguchi simply switched the device on his arm again, saying that some people never learn. The trajectory of Shin's attack changed and hit Sakamoto on the arm. Annoyed, Sakamoto praised Shin's kick, while a terrified Shin thanked him. Horiguchi injected something else into his body, causing the muscles in his right thigh to grow. He quickly moved to Shin's side, and Shin thought to himself how fast he was. Shin managed to block Horiguchi's punch, but the force sent him flying out of the room, breaking the glass wall in the process. Shin commented on how painful it was, while Horiguchi remarked on how light he was since he went through the glass. Sakamoto prepared to hit Horiguchi on the head with a microscope, but when Horiguchi switched his device again, Sakamoto suddenly stopped, allowing Horiguchi to easily punch him away and send him flying. "Nice try," said Horiguchi, explaining that whenever he thought about attacking his partner, the attack automatically stopped. Horiguchi arrogantly stated that even the legendary hitman was rendered helpless by science. Shin prepared to charge and said he only needed to read Horiguchi's mind to figure out the on and off switch. Horiguchi immediately retorted, asking what good it would do even if he could read his mind. Horiguchi quickly lunged and repeatedly stabbed Shin in the chest with a syringe. Horiguchi taunted, saying what use was mind reading if you couldn't control your own body, calling the ability stupid. Shin's face showed his frustration, and he suddenly remembered Asakura apologizing to him for getting him involved in his research. Horiguchi, seemingly more deranged, explained that he couldn't understand why their boss valued such a useless ability and that he himself was not impressed by it. Shin was annoyed by his words, and Sakamoto suddenly lifted him to help him stand. Sakamoto explained that he only lifted Shin because he didn't want his clothes to get dirty, as they would be hard to clean, which puzzled Horiguchi. However, Shin was surprised when Sakamoto added that Shin's powers were not stupid and that he would prove it to this mad scientist right now. Horiguchi taunted them, saying it was hard to relate when there was such a vast IQ gap, and then firmly pushed the syringes further into his shoulders, declaring it was time to kill them. The mad scientist, relishing the pain, transformed, growing in size like Bruce Banner turning into the Hulk, and announced that they would now begin the final experiment. Shin asked Sakamoto what they were going to do in this situation, to which Sakamoto replied that it was simple. He then thought of something that stunned Shin, making him ask if he was serious. Horiguchi shouted that attacking him was pointless because they would only end up hurting each other in the process. Sakamoto asked Shin if he was ready, to which Shin agreed. As they approached the mad scientist, it turned into a royal rumble. While Shin and Sakamoto attacked Horiguchi, they also attacked each other. Horiguchi realized what they were doing and explained that by attacking all targets simultaneously, their attacks would land even if he flipped the switch. However, he wondered why he was the only one getting hit. The two continued their assault with combos like right uppercuts, left hooks, right straights, and left roundhouse kicks. While being beaten, Horiguchi screamed that for humanity's types like them, the pain was both agonizing and pleasurable. Eventually, Shin and Sakamoto managed to defeat the mad scientist, causing his downfall. Shin was nervous on the side because he thought he might die in that fight due to Sakamoto's punches. In the next scene, some scientists helped Shin and Sakamoto remove the electrodes that Horiguchi had implanted in the backs of their necks. After that, a male scientist thanked Shin for saving them, especially considering how they had treated him before. Shin brushed it off and said it was okay. He smiled and explained that he now liked his abilities and where he was, to which the scientist responded that it was good to hear. Shin expressed his joy, noting that even though Sakamoto was now retired, he was still excited to dodge the attacks of this legendary hitman. While happily explaining that because Sakamoto was now chubbier, his punches were stronger, Shin suddenly stopped when he saw Sakamoto imagining stabbing him in the mouth with a syringe. Shin shouted, asking why Sakamoto imagined killing him, to which Sakamoto pointed out that he didn't need to mention his weight. While on floor B1, the two were running in a hurry and discussed that the scientists in the lab earlier mentioned that Liu might be imprisoned in a cell on B4. A scientist also warned them earlier to be cautious because as they go deeper into the facility, there will be more traps. Shin told Sakamoto that due to their fight earlier with Mad Horiguchi, it was reaffirmed to him that Sakamoto is indeed the ultimate fighter. Sakamoto then asked where Shin's praise was coming from. Shin asked if Sakamoto's former colleagues in the order were as strong as him. Sakamoto responded with his thoughts, stating that the order has different kinds of assassins. Sakamoto illustrated, if there were 10 Shins attacking an assassin from the order, all 10 Shins would be killed in just 6 seconds. Shin was surprised because each one could be killed in less than a second. Shin then asked if the order was really that good because he didn't see Nagumo being that amazing. Sakamoto jokingly said that if Shin encountered a member of the order, he should pretend to be dead. This annoyed Shin, who told him not to joke around. While they were running, a hole suddenly opened directly under Sakamoto, and he fell straight down. Shin was shocked and screamed because of this. Meanwhile, on floor B5, where the underground shipping corridor was located, Kashima was seen walking down the stairs with 2 companions. One was wearing a black leather jacket with fur and a metallic face mask, while the other appeared to be a tall, sleepy-looking man in a trench coat. Kashima was annoyed because after they seized the lab and all his plans were running smoothly, there was suddenly another problem he had to deal with. He put his arms around Onigahara and Takamido and said it was a good thing he had an excellent team who had his back. Kashima adjusted his necktie and prepared to start. The 3 were seen approaching a path full of corpses, with a man holding a bloody hammer and a woman in a black funeral dress waiting for them. They saw each other, and Shishiba told Osaragi that he was right in what he said. Shishiba smiled and said they had baited 3 big fish due to the chaos he and Osaragi caused on B5. Kashima called the order the Association's lapdogs and asked the 2 what the order wanted from them. He also said that they should learn better manners. Kashima's companions were revealed as the B4 boss, Onigahara, who wore a face mask and had slicked back hair, and the B3 boss, Takamido, who had black curly hair and a beard. While sitting on a pile of corpses, Shishiba said they shouldn't be angry because he and Osaragi were just having fun. Osaragi added that the facility felt like a maze and they even got lost. Kashima apologized and offered to guide them to the exit. Shishiba said they were looking for X, and if they are here, they wanted to kill them. Kashima replied that the master isn't here and is a very busy person. The lab was his independent project and had nothing to do with the master. Shishiba said that it didn't matter anymore. They violated JAA policies, manufactured illegal weapons, and used hostages for extortion. Because of this, they all needed to die. Kashima responded that this was unacceptable and asked how he could get them to leave. Shishiba then asked if he could use the bathroom before they continued. Suddenly, Onigahara positioned himself in front of Shishiba with Takamido beside him, asking Kashima if he could kill Shishiba. Shishiba reacted sarcastically as if surprised but with a blank expression. Kashima told Onigahara and Takamido to do whatever they wanted, and Onigahara immediately started. Then, 4 metallic tentacles, like Dr. Octopus, suddenly emerged from Onigahara's back to attack Shishiba. Osaragi asked if Shishiba was done with the 2. Shishiba was about to tell Osaragi to wait, but Osaragi quickly attacked with her round chainsaw and beheaded the 2. Shishiba watched without much reaction. Osaragi heard Shishiba's comment too late and asked again if he wasn't finished yet. Shishiba, with his face covered in the enemy's blood, said he just wanted to step back so he wouldn't get splattered with blood. Osaragi apologized, and Shishiba said he wasn't angry. This was why he wore a cheap suit. Osaragi noted that there was already blood on Shishiba before that happened. Shishiba then asked Osaragi if she didn't find it difficult to make friends. They both looked at Kashima, who was trembling and speechless. Kashima started crying and asked why they did that. Holding Onigahara's severed head while crying, he asked if they had no regard for human life and what Onigahara and Takamido did to them. Shishiba was puzzled by Kashima's words. Kashima lifted his reindeer mask and revealed his terrifying face. While pulling the thread from his arm, he said that all the poor souls they killed without consideration might have had families and friends. He asked if they didn't care about other people's feelings. He pulled a long thread from his arm and said that because of that, he needed to kill them. Osaraji showed no reaction, just watching him, while Shishiba only said, "Whoa," with an expressionless face. Kashima removed his deer mask and his hand. Instead of a hand, many uneven blades emerged. Kashima said that those who have no respect for the sanctity of human life have no right to call themselves assassins. Osaraji asked if they didn't also kill many people. Shishiba replied that Kashima's double standards were creepy and told him to die. Kashima moved quickly, and Shishiba was surprised when his necktie was cut, and he was wounded in the chest. While staring at each other, Kashima said that everything he did was ordered by his master. His acts of extermination served a purpose, which is why they were permitted. Shishiba asked if that was the case, then quickly placed the hammer's claw on Kashima's forehead, pulling it hard to break his neck. Kashima's head was turned 180 degrees, so Shishiba said he was done. Kashima fell to the ground, and Shishiba and Osaraji began to walk away. Osaraji asked if Shishiba was okay, and he replied not to be stupid because he was just sizing up Kashima. He compared it to a baseball tactic where the batter shouldn't swing at the first pitch. Suddenly, Kashima stood up and straightened his head back into place. Shishiba, with an irritated expression while fidgeting with his hammer, asked what was going on now, while Osaraji also looked back, seemingly bored. Kashima apologized again and explained that his spine was artificial, which is why he could do that. But his explanation was cut short when Sakamoto suddenly fell from above and landed on Kashima. The impact was so strong that it shattered the floor. Kashima was extremely shocked by the heavy weight on him. Shishiba, once again saying "whoa," but this time with a slight tremble and sweat, greeted Sakamoto with "long time no see." Osaraji just looked puzzled. Sakamoto was also surprised to see Shishiba and wondered where he was. So, these are the three simultaneous events currently facing the Sakamoto family. Sakamoto is now confronting Kashima in B5 while reuniting with Shishiba. Lu is still fighting the Among Us goons, with Asakura and Tanaka, in their ongoing prison break. Meanwhile, Shin is running and worrying about Sakamoto and Lu because he has no idea what has happened to them. During the face-off between the Order and Kashima, Sakamoto and Shishiba greeted each other. Then Shishiba introduced Osaraji to Sakamoto because she had just joined the Order and they hadn't met before. Osaraji quietly looked closely at Sakamoto, and she suddenly blushed and sweated when she found him cute, thinking he looked like a teddy bear. Suddenly, Kashima spoke up and acknowledged Sakamoto's presence as the legendary assassin, the only person who managed to injure X. Sakamoto simply asked Shishiba who was talking to him and what he was talking about. Shishiba replied that he was the boss of the group that took over the lab and asked Sakamoto if he knew about X, while Osaraji was still standing behind them, thinking that Sakamoto looked like a teddy bear. While pulling and detaching the thread from his lips, Kashima told Sakamoto that he had no idea why he was there, but all he wanted to do was kill him quickly so he could take him to his master and receive praise from his master. Sakamoto wondered about what he was saying and doing while Shishiba was disgusted, unable to believe what he was seeing. Then Kashima spat out a gun barrel from his mouth. Sakamoto commented that he seemed strong and called him Weapon Man. Shishiba wondered why Osaraji was just staring at Sakamoto, still thinking he looked like a teddy bear. Meanwhile, in the B3 manufacturing area, Shin continued running upward, now needing to climb just one more floor to reach Lu. Shin told himself that he needed to hurry to reach Lu so they could quickly return to Sakamoto because they needed to get home before dinner. But it seemed that his opponent, Seiba, who had started using his invisibility skill, was also there in B3. Fortunately, Shin still sensed Seiba behind him using his clairvoyance. This allowed Shin to stop running just in time to dodge Seiba's sudden attack from the front. Shin stepped back to gain some distance from his attacker and immediately recognized Seiba, calling him an invisible bastard. Seiba thought to himself that he needed to work hard in this fight because it would have been easier if Shin hadn't noticed him. Shin was irritated that someone had stopped him from running to Lu, so he told Seiba Lu better be safe. Seiba said he didn't know because he was just following orders. He also mentioned that he would receive a bonus if he killed Shin, but was confused about whether his boss wanted him to kill Shin or bring him in alive. Shin apologized, saying Seiba had to step aside because he didn't have time to help him earn extra money. Seiba suddenly said he wanted to save up 20 million yen before retirement. Then Seiba used his invisibility skill again and said he wanted to finish their fight quickly before the workday ended because he didn't want to work overtime. Shin became nervous because Seiba suddenly disappeared in front of him. But Shin quickly read Seiba's mind, who said the fight would be over quickly, so he realized Seiba was right behind him. Seiba delivered consecutive attacks to Shin, who couldn't defend in time. Shin suffered wounds on his arms and shoulders and thought it was useless to know Seiba's location if he didn't know how he would attack. Then Shin suddenly felt painful attacks again, and Seiba showed himself a little, telling Shin he didn't like clocking out too early from work, so he wanted to prolong their fight just enough before the time ended. Meanwhile, in Sakamoto's fight, we see Sakamoto dodging an attack from Kashima, who pulled out another new weapon from his right arm. The weapon released threads with mini claws that attached to Sakamoto's clothes. This made Sakamoto wonder if his opponent was even human. Then Kashima charged the gun in his mouth. It suddenly released a powerful laser beam that Sakamoto dodged by stepping back hard enough to detach the mini claws from his clothes. He looked for Shishiba and was surprised to see Shishiba leaving with Osaraji, saying they had other business elsewhere, leaving Kashima to Sakamoto. Sakamoto agreed and asked Shishiba to greet the whole gang, but while he was speaking, Kashima suddenly struck him hard, sending him flying to the side, causing an explosion. Shishiba and Osaraji had already left the battle area, and while running, Osaraji asked Shishiba if it was okay to leave Sakamoto. Shishiba said yes and pointed her toward their new target. Osaraji voiced her concern, saying the teddy bear-like Sakamoto seemed weak and would surely be killed by Kashima. Shishiba acknowledged that their crazy, patched-up jerk opponent was strong and would be a challenge for an out-of-shape Sakamoto. But despite that, he can never imagine Sakamoto dying. Now, Sakamoto stood up and shrugged off the dust from his shoulder. Kashima was irritated with Sakamoto for constantly dodging and asked if he could agree to be killed quickly. Sakamoto told him that he had a friend who valued the entire lab, so he and his friend wanted Kashima and his crew to leave. Kashima said what they were doing was for something bigger, and that taking over the lab would enlighten the future of the assassin world. Sakamoto said he didn't understand Kashima's meaning, but he knew that if he didn't care about the people around him, he wouldn't achieve anything in life. Kashima pulled out the gun barrel from his mouth again and insulted Sakamoto's intelligence, saying Kashima's people had probably already killed Sakamoto's friends. Sakamoto told him he wasn't worried while he swiftly and suddenly stabbed the gun barrel with a pin as it began to charge. Sakamoto pushed it back into Kashima's mouth, causing it to explode inside, releasing an explosion from his eyes, ears, and mouth. Sakamoto said his staff members were stronger than Kashima thought. Kashima, still angry with smoke coming from his mouth, said he hated people who talked back rudely, almost as much as he hated Christmas. Sakamoto replied rudely to Kashima, saying he didn't like people like him who talked too much. Meanwhile, in Shin's fight, we see him being thrown towards the railings. Seiba, while invisible, commented that Shin's clairvoyance was really annoying as he always used it to dodge at the last second. Shin said Seiba was still more annoying to fight because of his invisibility. Then Shin suddenly sent Seiba to his right. Seiba said his work time was almost over, so it was time to finish the fight and prepared his invisible knife. Shin used his clairvoyance again to prepare for Seiba's charge. But this time, Shin seemed too late to dodge, and Seiba managed to stab him in the lower chest area. Shin's eyes widened in pain as he grabbed Seiba's clothes after touching his own wound. As he fell to the ground, he left a blood mark on Seiba's visible clothes. Seiba commented that Shin's blood was disgusting. Then Shin suddenly said he was now sure he wouldn't miss. Seiba was puzzled and asked what Shin meant, who was now smiling confidently. Then 2 bullets suddenly ricocheted off the floor, hitting Seiba in the shoulder and torso, shocking him greatly. Apparently, they came from Heisuke's sniper rifle, who was delighted to see an invisible person. While lying wounded, Shin thanked Heisuke for the nice timing. Seiba remained poker-faced, even though he was becoming more irritated now that a sniper had suddenly arrived. When Heisuke heard Shin's praise, he was so delighted that all sorts of things ran through his mind that Shin couldn't understand. Heisuke suddenly told Shin that he and Pisuke had come to save him and asked what Shin was doing, but Shin just thought that Heisuke was indeed a moron. Seiba ran to hide from Heisuke's line of sight. He remarked that Heisuke was a weirdo sniper because he was noisy and stood out, which wasn't normal for a sniper, making him easy to hide from. However, Heisuke could still see Seiba clearly and had a clear shot at him even though he was hiding. Heisuke fired a shot that ricocheted off the railings and the floor, shifting the trajectory perfectly towards Seiba, but it missed slightly and only grazed Seiba's shoulder, leaving him wondering how he was still hit. While reloading his bullet, Heisuke was praised by Shin for his impressive ricochet shots. Heisuke replied that even if his target was hiding, it was still like he was standing right in front of him. Seiba reactivated his invisibility skill, irritating Shin as he crawled on the floor. Heisuke remained confident, saying he could still hear Seiba's location. He then fired multiple shots that ricocheted off the walls and still flew towards Seiba's location. However, Seiba quickly ran to avoid them. The bullets created thick smoke, causing Seiba to disappear from Shin's sight again. Seiba suddenly appeared on a higher platform where Heisuke was and threw something at Heisuke. Heisuke looked up upon hearing Seiba, but it was too late to dodge the sharp material Seiba had thrown, which struck Heisuke in the shoulder. The impact was so strong that it knocked him down and even pierced and got stuck in the concrete wall. It was revealed that what Seiba threw had invisibility properties. Shin was surprised to realize it was an invisible lead pipe. Seiba approached the fallen Heisuke, saying he didn't actually have supernatural powers. Instead, his suit could make anything invisible. Seiba stepped on Heisuke's hand, holding the sniper rifle, making Heisuke groan quietly. Seiba was shocked when Heisuke still managed to fire a bullet from it. A powerful bullet hit Seiba's right shoulder directly and critically, severing his entire right arm. Heisuke quickly rose to his knees and warned Seiba to surrender. Otherwise, his head would be the next to be severed. Seiba smiled slightly at this, but Shin suddenly shouted at Heisuke to run. Seiba then said he was just joking because his right hand, holding a knife, reappeared. He had only made it invisible earlier. He immediately stabbed Heisuke hard in the stomach, shocking him with the intense pain, using just one hand. Heisuke lost consciousness due to this, and Seiba wondered why he would go to such lengths for a friend. Shouldn't friends be enjoyable to be with? If all you get from them is suffering, you should cut them out of your life. Shin thought deeply about a solution to Seiba's invisibility. While invisible and walking away, Seiba told them that as third-rate assassins, they should just go home. Heisuke suddenly spoke again. He said his friends called his sniping skills top-notch, so he won't let them eat their words. Seiba became more irritated and told him to just die. Heisuke suddenly shouted Shin's name loudly, and they looked at each other. Pisuke flew quickly above Heisuke to drop a bullet into the bolt of Heisuke's sniper rifle. Seiba was caught off guard, and Heisuke immediately fired his sniper rifle. The bullet ricocheted off the wall and the floor before heading in Seiba's direction, but it missed and went up to the ceiling. Heisuke's face was blank, and Seiba commented that it was a pity he missed, but it was a good try given how dark their area was. Suddenly, the smoke detector that the bullet hit on the ceiling beeped, activating all the emergency showers in the entire area. They all got wet, and Seiba wondered what their plan was, while Heisuke handed the fight against Seiba back to Shin. Shin immediately charged at Seiba, now clearly visible due to the water outlining his body. Shin delivered a powerful head scissors takedown to Seiba. Seiba's body was too pained to move, so he stayed lying on the floor in exhaustion. He was finally defeated. Heisuke was happy because his plan, relayed to Shin using his mind, had worked. Shin suddenly complained to him that figuring out his nonsense thoughts was extremely difficult. Heisuke couldn't believe what Shin said. Suddenly, a loud explosion occurred behind them, destroying the entire wall and scattering railings. The three were extremely shocked. They were so scared that Pisuki clung to Heisuke for a hug. Let's move to B5 underground freight passageway, where Sakamoto and Kashima are. Kashima explained to Sakamoto that if any members of the Order found their place there, he had bombs ready to blow up the entire lab, along with all the evidence. We see rubble and stones starting to fall. Kashima lamented that all their research would be wasted, but there was nothing he could do about it. He told Sakamoto they only had 20 minutes left before the whole place collapsed, along with Sakamoto's friends. While cracking his knuckles, Sakamoto told Kashima that even 5 minutes would have been plenty for him. In an instant, Kashima disappeared from Sakamoto's sight and targeted his face with a thrust, but Sakamoto easily dodged it. Kashima commented that Sakamoto's body didn't seem agile and asked if Sakamoto thinks his body was fabulous. He explained that he used the scientific technology of the lab to weaponize 70% of his body, and likened Sakamoto to a pig on a platter. Sakamoto replied that he also had weapons, catching Kashima's attention. Kashima thought that Sakamoto might have just been testing him earlier. Sakamoto reached into the pocket of his apron and pulled out a sticker, a flyer with a coupon, and a mechanical pencil. Kashima immediately attacked with his gun hand, commenting that Sakamoto's items were amusing. He closed in and prepared to use his blade hands, saying that those things wouldn't do any good. Sakamoto clicked the mechanical pencil, extending the lead, then snapped it off with his finger, sending it into Kashima's eye. Kashima squinted as his left eye bled, but just as he was saying that one eye was enough, his right eye suddenly blacked out too. It turned out Sakamoto had used the sticker to block it. He swiftly moved behind Kashima and hit him hard, sending him crashing into the wall. While holding something resembling a belt, Sakamoto explained that relying on weapons was a sign of being a third-rate assassin. Kashima laughed and, getting up, reset his bones to normal. He retorted that if Sakamoto couldn't remove a third-rate assassin from the lab, it meant he was a fifth-rate assassin. Sakamoto scratched his cheek and wondered if Kashima was immortal. Kashima agreed that it was a good question and pointed that even he himself didn't know what it would take to kill him. Then we had a flashback of Kashima talking to X, with bodies sprawled on the floor around them. During this time, X told him that the pursuit of exalted justice required necessary evils. X asked if Kashima understood this and said that, in short, there were people in the world who needed to die. Kashima disagreed, explaining that the law forbade killing, and in school, they were taught that all life was equally sacred, and everyone despised him. X silenced him, and using the blood on his hand, he drew an X on his mouth. "Are you not with me?" X asked, accepting him completely. Kashima felt a thrill from this, and returning to the present, he explained that X validated everything about him, so there was nothing he wouldn't do for him. While he was talking, a train suddenly passed behind Sakamoto, causing both of them to jump into the air. Kashima seized the chance to use his wire and bound Sakamoto with it. He boarded the train and dragged Sakamoto along the tracks, saying he was just another hypocrite who couldn't do anything on his own. Kashima was shocked when he looked closely at Sakamoto and saw that he was riding on a wooden plank, using it as a surfboard while being dragged. Kashima commented that Sakamoto was amusing, but he wondered how long he could last. Sakamoto used the flyer he had been holding to cut the wires binding him, surprising Kashima. Sakamoto pulled on Kashima's wire, telling him he talked too much, and slammed him into a wall. Suddenly, we were on a moving train, and the conductor announced that the next stop was Okutabi, and the doors would open on the right-hand side. The conductor thought to himself that every day was the same boring routine and wished something interesting would happen. As he operated the train, he noticed the wall on his right was breaking apart, and soon Sakamoto and Kashima burst through. The conductor was stunned as he locked eyes with Kashima, and soon they collided with the train, shattering the front of it. The speed of the train caused them to bounce around, scaring the passengers. Kashima managed to stop himself from being thrown, and we could see his patched-up body. Kashima realized that the area from earlier was connected to the subway line, and the people who saw him were worried. Kashima grabbed a drink from a passenger and quickly drank it, but the water just spilled out of the hole in his stomach. After drinking, he commented on how impressive Sakamoto was, understanding why his master liked him. He admired how Sakamoto used his environment and whatever was at hand when fighting, and even his mere presence was a powerful weapon, recognizing him as the ultimate assassin. As he wondered where Sakamoto was hiding, it turned out he was right next to him. Sakamoto had lost weight, so Kashima didn't recognize him. Sakamoto then delivered a powerful kick to his face, smashing it into the train wall. Kashima's face showed shock as Sakamoto commented that if he was truly immortal, he wouldn't need to worry about killing him. In the next scene, we return to a point in time when Kashima was just 17 years old. He had killed some people who were tormenting a cat. Many onlookers questioned why he would do such a thing just for that reason. At that time, Kashima thought that by eliminating evil people, he was doing the right thing, so he couldn't understand what the problem was. The people were terrified of him, saying that he had gone too far. Kashima expressed that he always tried to do the right thing, but no one understood him. Suddenly, a man appeared and told him that he was a good person. The man explained that few people were willing to dirty their hands to do good, and invited Kashima to join him in fighting against evil together. We return to the present, where Kashima is still able to stand. He declares that in the name of sublime justice, he wants to help fulfill his master's dream, which means killing anyone who stands in his way. An old man then entered from Nippuri Station, catching Sakamoto's attention. In an instant, Sakamoto quickly moved towards Kashima, telling him that they were in the priority seating area and he should move aside. Sakamoto forcefully pushed Kashima to make way for the old man, who then thanked Sakamoto. As Kashima struggled to stay upright, he couldn't believe that he couldn't keep up. They moved to the middle of the train car, and the fear was evident on Kashima's face as he faced Sakamoto. As the train moved and the conductor announced that the next stop was Okutabi, Sakamoto began to beat up Kashima on the side. Soon, the door broke, and they ended up in the next train car. Kashima thought to himself that Sakamoto's body was tougher than steel. Kashima couldn't believe he was being beaten by Sakamoto, given that his own body was scientifically modified while Sakamoto had an ordinary body. As he was being thrown around, Kashima launched an attack from his gun hand, but Sakamoto easily deflected it with a long railing. Sakamoto then delivered a flurry of staff thrusts at Kashima. Frustrated, Kashima unleashed a weapon from his abdomen and charged an attack, surprising Sakamoto. This caused a massive explosion, leading Kashima to think he had defeated Sakamoto. Sakamoto was thrown out of the train, but he landed on another train heading in the opposite direction. He quickly ran to the end of the train he had landed on, jumped off, and returned to the original train. Kashima, exhausted, sat down, confident that his master would praise him because he defeated Sakamoto. As he thought about cleaning himself up before meeting his master, the door beside him suddenly opened and Sakamoto emerged. Kashima was shocked and in fear, threw the elderly passengers next to him at Sakamoto, telling him to stay away. Sakamoto easily caught them. Kashima screamed, asking why Sakamoto wouldn't die. He called Sakamoto a stupid sheep with no dreams or ideals. He insisted that the world needed people like them and couldn't understand why no one else saw that. Sakamoto replied that he really didn't understand what Kashima was talking about, but he wouldn't want someone like Kashima near his family. Sakamoto prepared to deliver a powerful punch. When they reached the next station, Kashima was thrown out of the train. Sakamoto followed up with a strong kick, further launching Kashima. Kashima hit the access gate and lost consciousness. Sakamoto opened the access gate with his beep card, dragged Kashima out of the station, and called Shin to let him know he was okay and had taken care of the boss. Meanwhile, several minutes have passed, and the condition of the lab, which continues to collapse, has worsened. All personnel on floor B2 can be seen panicking. Now, instead of lab goons, Lu is kicking falling rubble to protect Tanaka and Asakura, who are with her in the prison break. She wonders why the whole place suddenly started to collapse. Asakura said that it doesn't seem to be a natural disaster, and Tanaka just screamed that he didn't want to die. Lu said that they needed to find a way out. Then, a large piece of rubble suddenly fell from above her, and she noticed it too late. Fortunately, Shin caught her and quickly carried her away from the path of the large rubble. Lu was surprised by Shin saving her life, and Shin asked her if she could stand. Afterward, they both became speechless and awkward because they had just come from a serious fight, while Heisuke, behind them, asked what was going on between the two of them. Shin, with his back to Lu, just said they needed to hurry to the exit. Then Lu suddenly sniffled, revealing that she was ugly, crying to Shin while apologizing for what she had said earlier and claiming it was all her fault. She said she shouldn't have worn Shin's apron. Shin was disgusted and pushed her away because her snot was getting on his clothes. Shin said he had already let it go. Shin also apologized because he had said things to Lu that he shouldn't have. Heisuke suddenly spoke up, saying he felt relieved even though he didn't know what was going on. Pisuki agreed with him. While the whole place continued to collapse, Asakura was surprised to see Shin again after not seeing him for a long time. The two felt awkward during their reunion and almost had nothing to say to each other. Lu nudged Asakura and asked if he wasn't going to apologize to Shin. Asakura said he just didn't know where to start. Their conversation was abruptly cut off when Shin's phone vibrated. When Shin answered the call, it was Sakamoto, who told him that once he found Lu, they should immediately leave because the entire lab would collapse in 15 minutes. Shin couldn't believe the warning he received from Sakamoto, and Heisuke was worried about the other people still inside the lab. Shin immediately borrowed the lab's blueprint from Asakura to see the safest and fastest exit route they could take, but Lu said they didn't have time for that. Shin was having a hard time thinking and deciding due to extreme stress. Shin managed to focus in the midst of the chaos and began reading the minds of various people still inside the lab. After this, he told Lu and Heisuke that he could still hear voices on their floor, so they split into two teams. While Heisuke and Lu were together rescuing people on their floor, Asakura was with Shin rescuing people on the lower level. But before they could get far, Asakura couldn't stay silent anymore and told Shin that he could see Shin had learned to use his powers properly. As they ran, Shin asked Asakura if he could see how useful the outcome of his research was. Asakura remembered how Shin looked as a child under his care and realized that his research had indeed yielded good results, which was evident in the grown-up Shin. Meanwhile, on the lowest basement floor where the classified information vault was located, we see Osaraji with darkening vision as a large piece of rubble was about to fall on her. But she just struck that rubble with her left hand as if it was nothing, while Shishiba calmly sat in front of a monitor amidst all the chaos. Osaraji asked Shishiba if he wasn't done with what he was doing because she was tired of slicing falling rubble. Shishiba replied that he was still counting on Osaraji. But a few moments later, Shishiba found what he was looking for. Shishiba discovered that Kashima was really a liar because he caught him on CCTV footage in the lab talking to someone he called Master. Thus, Kashima wasn't really independent in his actions in the lab because his master, X, also known as Slur, was the one pulling the strings. Shishiba was now successful in finding out who their true enemy was, and Slur was looking directly at the CCTV as if piercing through the viewer. Osaraji now knew the appearance of the JAA's true enemy, Slur, and knowing that Slur was strong, she grabbed a heavy object and released all her hidden anger by throwing it at the monitor displaying Slur's face looking at them. Shishiba said it didn't matter because they hadn't ventured against the order even once. Osaragi then said they were all dead. Meanwhile, as Asakura and Shin ran, Asakura asked how many people they could save on this floor. Shin said he could hear the voices of 2 stranded people. When they approached a person sitting near some rubble, Shin initially thought it was a stranded person, but he suddenly felt extremely rattled as if his soul had been sucked out. As they approached, this person turned out to be the number 1 enemy of the order, Slur. Asakura and Shin froze in fear, but Shin also felt an even more terrifying image in his mind from reading Slur's thoughts and presence. Shin sweated profusely due to the intense bloodthirst he felt from Slur. Then Slur suddenly appeared behind them, and Shin was shocked to hear him say he knew his name. And Shin was left speechless when Slur passed on a greeting for him to Sakamoto. When Shin looked behind him, he was surprised to see that the person talking to him was gone. Then Asakura told him they needed to hurry. A few minutes later, we see outside the Okatabe Museum Hall that some people who came from inside the lab had made it out safely. Heisuke and Lu, now joined by Sakamoto, were the first to get out, and they all reunited with Shin and Asakura, who had just emerged. Lu asked Shin why his face was so pale, but Shin said it was nothing. Then Shin and Asakura were suddenly surrounded by all the scientists from the lab, who were worried about them and asked if they were okay and if they had sustained any injuries. Shin said he was okay and asked if they were okay, especially since their entire lab had been destroyed, but they told Shin not to worry about them. Tada said that all their research was saved inside his bald head. Shin felt relieved by this. Then Shin suddenly read the minds of all the scientists he used to work with as a child. But the once hurtful words had been replaced with heartwarming words and gratitude. Shin blushed and pretended to be annoyed, saying he could read all their thoughts. Asakura approached Sakamoto and said he was glad to see Shin happy. So, he asked a favor from Sakamoto's entire group and entrusted Shin to them. Sakamoto, Lu, Heisuke, and Pisuke happily agreed. Later that night at dinner time, Aoi asked everyone why they all looked so disheveled. Shin explained that they had done so much earlier at the museum, and Aoi told Shin to make sure they put all their laundry in the hamper. Lu, on the other hand, had already fallen asleep while sitting at the dinner table. Meanwhile, Hana happily recounted her day at school with her daddy. Heisuke was happy for Hana because earlier in the afternoon, Hana had been crying because she couldn't share her day with her daddy. Shin suddenly took Lu's fried shrimp tempura, saying she was just sleeping on it anyway. Lu got mad because she was just saving it and was still going to eat it. Shin argued it was just one shrimp. In retaliation, Lu grabbed Shin's Kenyaka Chikawabu jelly. Meanwhile, Pisuke was happily and quietly eating bird seeds. Sakamoto was getting irritated because Shin and Lu wouldn't stop arguing at their dinner table, so in his mind, he knocked their heads together so hard they both spat blood. Shin was surprised and angry because he read Sakamoto's mind, but Sakamoto told him telepathically that he did it because Shin still hadn't learned. Lu, on the other hand, was just confused and couldn't understand their conversation. Shin then reminded Sakamoto that only he could hear his thoughts, so Lu remained completely clueless.